Good evening, fellow heretics. Welcome to a special Star Wars themed episode of Nerds and Heresy. I'm your host, Darth Dadpool.
And I am Jedi Nat. And these are not the religions you are looking for.
We shall see. Joining us tonight are two Jedi scum waiting for us behind the blast doors, who have co-authored a brand new piece of rebel propaganda. And we're going to talk to them about that. But first, let's watch that intro.
Hold on to your butts.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you, guys, for enduring our theatrics and joining us for a special episode. Please welcome very special guests, Dr. Adair and Jonathan Pearce. Would you guys mind spending a couple minutes introducing yourselves?
Can I just, before I introduce myself, since we're in such a...
Andy froze.
Oh,
no!
So the answer is no.
I've got Star Wars glass.
Oh, right.
Oh, okay.
Yes, no, that's acceptable. That's fine.
Okay, over to you, Aaron.
I was going to say thank you for having us. So say we all.
Ooh,
I love that we're combining. It's my favorite thing to do is to put Star Trek where it doesn't belong and just call that a mission. Just.
Do you know what? I had to write a book with this guy. You know, he's a wrong'un. He's a wrong'un.
That's fine.
This is Nerds and Heresy, so I can't blame Dr. Aaron for.
I don't know if you can speak Klingon, but.
I can a little bit. Hokba, hokbe. To be or not to be.
Okay. Side note: my family grew up with my aunt and uncle speaking Klingon to each other at family events, so that no one knew what they were talking about. True fact. Anyway, move on.
I do that with philosophy with my mates, just at the pub.
Okay, so tell us about yourselves.
Yeah, Dr.
John,
Hughes,
you need to start because you're the one with the glasses.
Okay, well, this is true. So I'm a philosopher, I'm an author, I'm a journalist, I write for OnlySky, I am a YouTuber as well, and in fact I've been obsessed recently with the Ukraine war, so most of my YouTube, I've split my channels and actually spend most of my time talking about that these days, which is a bit of a sidebar. But so I've written loads of books. Most recently, before this one, was 30 Arguments Against the Existence of God, Heaven, Hell, Satan and Divine Design, and elements of that actually pop into this new book that we've just written, Aliens and Religion Where Two Worlds Collide, and so we're just going to come and speak to you about that. We are kind of the two faces of Janus or something. So I will be philosophically minded, and Aaron will be scientifically minded. But actually, he is very well versed philosophically speaking, and I'm not particularly well versed scientifically speaking. So he's basically your man to go to. I'll just chip in every now and again. Thank you for having us. And by the way, I've got a whole pile of Star Wars toys here, and so every so often I'm just going to bring up someone, and then people in the live chat can say that's someone, and I don't have a clue who they are, but I do have an original, do have an original, very bad condition Millennium Falcon with the old clicky gun at the top.
Very cool.
So this is original stuff, you know.
You say it's in rough condition, but honestly, that's pretty much what the Millennium Falcon looked like just after it completed the Kessel Run in under 12 parsecs.
This is a very good point.
12 parsecs. Make sure you get that right. Han will get very upset.
Yeah, this is true.
Does that logo have the round or the square rectangle? What am I thinking? Antenna. The little pointy antenna, because. They made and I can't remember which one was first, but
it's round, but I've lost it.
Round, okay. So
I think it's in a shed somewhere. But yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, so Aaron is his Nat. Accurate. Yes, I was gonna say you guys seem to have a similar dynamic as we do. So I'm just like science, and that one is philosophy, and so it's theology.
So more history, theology, cool.
But we do what it is.
Yeah.
Both of us do.
Yeah, good.
No, so Aaron, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so Yeah, I'm Aaron Adair. I have a PhD in physics, so that is technically makes me a science guy. Uh, Currently, I work full time as a data scientist in the defense sector, while I'm also a research affiliate at MIT, where I continue my physics and education research. And also, I do some moonlighting as a Bible scholar. I've had a few things published academically and more popularly in those sorts of things, especially when it comes to the intersection of science and religion. My most famous book before this one was relating to the various scientific attempts to explain the Star of Bethlehem story and why they don't work.
I love it.
That one actually got some, yes. And that one got some nice international renown from some other scholars as well. I should mention I'm also a member of the Society of Biblical Literature. Went to the last conference to give a talk on Revelation, and at least a few people have actually read my stuff and did not say I was, completely full of myself. So I know a thing, maybe two.
I know a thing.
Is there a place I can read that? Because I wasn't familiar you did that. I'd love to hear you take more of it.
I'm currently in the process of getting that published. I presented it at SBL. It got a lot of good responses there, and now I'm trying to make somebody else look at it and say, okay, we're willing to waste paper on it.
Let's kill the trees for the environment.
I hope I get the chance to read that. So yeah,
on the Kindle,
together you guys jumping right into it. Let me just get my tabs in order.
Oh, it's not released
you guys
on the Kindle yet.
Yeah, so essentially what we wanted to do, I guess, is to look at really what the impact might be on the probability of God existing, given the discovery or the existence of intelligent alien life. And that's basically the broadly where we're going with that. But in order to discuss the ramifications of discovering intelligent alien life, we needed to do a little bit of work on, well, what are the chances there being intelligent alien life out there? And that's where Aaron, with his expertise, and in fact having worked even as an intern, was it on SETI,
yes.
had he brought a bit of his expertise to bear.
Yeah. I spent one summer working as an intern at the SETI Institute and actually got to use their radio telescope array for observing the night sky. Specifically, I'm making observations of just neutral hydrogen, but at the same time, all of those signals are being processed by a bank of computers looking for anything that looks intelligent.
Define intelligent.
So when I say intelligent, I don't mean was this Twitter message actually worth reading? When I say intelligent, it's more of another way of saying artificial. Is this a signal that could only be produced by a technology, even if what it's sending is the Nigerian prince scam or something like that? Right.
So whereas like an archaeologist would walk through the woods and look for something that's anthropocentric, you would have a xenopocentric viewpoint. I don't know what the word for that is, to look for something that is out of the natural order of things.
The term that gets used the most is we are looking for technosignatures.
Technosignature. Okay, that's cool. I like it. That's neat.
And so, yeah, what the first part of the book does is look at the famous ideas like the Drake equation and Fermi paradox that Aaron can avail you of, and he can talk to you about, and we sort of establish where we sit in terms of probability of intelligent alien life existing, and then we just go, right, let's dive in and let's take that as a kind of given, and then what would be the effect of this on religion, on society a little bit. We talk a little bit about that, talk about even non-religious people, what the effect might be, a little bit of psychology, a little bit of kind of prediction, but there are quite a bit of obviously philosophy and theology involved as well. We mainly talk about Christianity because of our context and our expertise and knowledge of that particular religion, but we do also look at other religions towards the end of the book. But I guess a good place to start would be kind of working out whether there is intelligent alien life out there, or talking a bit about that.
Yeah, and of course you might be thinking, is there intelligence out there? It's like, of course, we see it on CNN all the time when they're showing us these videos of these UFOs. Everyone's like, of course aliens exist. They're already here. buzzing our towers and things like that, and putting Wi-Fi in our chicken or whatever the conspiracy theory of the week is.
God, I don't even know how to start with those. But I think one of the things that we learn in paleontology is that a lot of people have theories about the organic matter soup being a part of an alien debris or some sort of organic matter that came from space, and that we are in fact the aliens here, which that's its own theory. But that's one of the ones that like gets thrown at paleontologists a lot. It's like, so you explain dinosaurs as like they're aliens and we're not, or like, anyway, I deal with a lot of non-evolutionists. It's problematic. But okay, so when you're
it's, I mean, you can get this. It makes me start. I mean, already it just makes me start thinking like, well, definitions. It's all about words. Like, what is an alien? And we talk about like an alien species, as in, coming across from a different country that's been brought as a seed, and then taking root in your country. And so, well, that's a bit, But then all you're talking about is just distances and other places. Okay, there might be a vacuum between you and another species or another life form. But yeah, these are just kind of words, aren't they? In some sense, that create possibly a false distinction. But yeah, anyway, that's me just suddenly going off on one, having a whole conversation with myself.
No, so I guess if your book focuses on viewpoints around Christianity, and if there is in fact an existence of aliens and how it would affect Christians in their belief system, is that correct? Or is it a more just an overview of if these were to exist, how would those on Earth react? Or like, I guess I want to know your point of view when it comes to your book, because I haven't read it. I just added it on my cart in Amazon, and we'll be getting it soon.
I'll answer this. So we actually try tackling the question of alien discovery. So like, what could be the sort of grander sociological impacts, and also that would depend on, do we just find alien tech a billion light years away versus, hey, the UFO is hovering and landing in front of Washington, D.C. Those should expect to have bigger societal impacts. They're not going to be identical in that way. So there is some question of there. And there's this thing called the Rio scale that actually tries to measure how much impact there would be depending on the kind of technology we pick up and its location. So there's that. We also look at theism generally. So in particular, what happens to the problem of evil if aliens also exist? We were building it off of some previous philosophical research that also was trying to be a bit mathematical, and we decided, let's be even more mathematical.
Oh no, I love it. Let's be even more anal about what we're saying within this theory.
At the very least, I like the precision of it. So we, covered that. So that's like a general issue. We do, of course, a huge amount of focus on Christianity because, one, I think the most amount of literature is related to there. It's Christians trying to talk about this, and also there's some bad history that the Christians are actually covering up, which we talk about. That I just went to a talk last weekend here, and basically trying to argue, no, that never happened. We never killed anybody because of aliens, but actually there was at least one execution because of aliens.
Wait, hold the phone. I want to dig into that. Where, where, and when?
Rome, February 1600 AD.
And
Giordano Bruno.
What did he do to...
So first off, like, Bruno was a philosopher, theologian, mystic.
Right.
Was also an early adopter of the Copernican model of the solar system and the universe, but he also was enamored with the cosmology that you find in what was called like the Epicurean system. So things you find in Lucretius's on the nature of things. So the universe is infinite, and it's just a whole bunch of atoms bumping into each other. And if you get an infinite universe with infinite time, with infinite things bumping into each other, eventually you get everything. And in that case, there's lots of other worlds with people on them. Bruno seemed to believe in that. And what we actually see in the somewhat recently rediscovered court transcripts or from his time with the Inquisition, apparently that was their biggest bugaboo. And when he was executed in 1600, and when I say executed, he was burned at the stake. there were 10 charges against him, and one of those charges was the plurality of worlds and people in them.
Would one of the other charges be something along the lines of witchcraft?
Other charges in there were things like denying the Trinity or the divinity of Jesus, the virgin birth. He was accused of that as well. But
how
yeah.
that
What's quite interesting with Giordano Bruno, is that a lot of modern Christian thinkers try and deny some of the aspects of why he was actually executed, and they try and there's a bit of covering it up, or a bit of sort of cherry picking, or highlighting certain parts but not others, and they do like to drop the idea that he really was executed for believing life could exist on other planets. I mean, that was part of, and there's been some recent work, going back into the original writing on this, and finding out that genuinely that was one of the reasons he was executed.
That's really interesting. I love that you guys have dived into the history of people. I don't want to say believing in this, but the people bringing up the concept or the probability of life out there, which, I mean, the likelihood is high. Like, there's something out there, but it's not likely that we will come across it. Well,
I always say that we're quarantined by distance. So I would say there's certainly life out there. It's just that it's so far away that actually the chance of us even finding out about it, let alone interacting with it in a meaningful way, let alone close up and physically interacting with them, is very slight. However, given that, I would surmise that it depends. If you think the universe is infinite, then there's going to be arguably infinite instances of intelligent life out there, or at least billions and billions, trillions and trillions. But I don't know if Aaron, you want to talk a little bit about the science there of like trying to get that conclusion.
Yeah. So it is
what you look at. Yeah, as far as seeing what life is out there. What probability scales and what measurements are you applying to your science of seeing what's out there?
Yeah, and I want to capture some of the things that Jonathan was saying about our being quarantined by distance. So the nearest star system to us is Proxima Centauri, which is a mere 4.2 light years away. Meaning, if you had a spaceship that could literally go at light speed, an Earth observer would say it took you about 4.2 years to get there, which doesn't sound by much, but if we took the fastest probe we have ever launched into deep space, the Voyager probes, it would take them somewhere on the order of 80,000 years to cover that distance. And that's the nearest star. So the distances are huge. If we want to cross the Milky Way, one end to the other, we're on the order of 100,000 light years. So if it already took 10 times the age of civilization to get to the nearest star, travel is prohibitively difficult unless you have hyperspace tech, perhaps. I also look into where the current science is on there, because there has been actually a lot of research in quite literally the warp drive from Star Trek. There was actually a solution to general relativity equations that was published in the early 1990s that basically deformed space and time, basically warping it, that could allow faster than light speeds, but it has all these other additional issues that seem to make it ultimately probably not physically possible, but it is still something actively researched and debated. I actually found articles published just last year on this very topic, so it's still hot research, but more likely than not, we're not going to go faster than light. If we are confined to light speed and the technologies that we can see, oh boy, is it really hard to cover the distances. I even ran some numbers about what kind of civilization could actually get to Earth if they actually could get on some sort of ship that goes an appreciable fraction the speed of light. And I realized if a civilization can actually get here in their rocket ship or whatever kind of ship that goes a very good fraction the speed of light, they would have to be at least 1,000,000 times more powerful than our civilization.
Yeah. I'm not arguing with that at all.
Yeah.
I do want to...
It might make sense why we haven't been visited, but then there's, of course, the question, how do we even know anyone's out there? Why would we even think so? We mentioned the Drake equation, which was basically a way of making reasonable guesstimates on numbers with just your best way of like breaking down a problem into smaller chunks. And if you can figure out values for those smaller chunks, then you can probably figure out the overall thing, or at least, a range of possibilities. But the problem has been
real quick,
where the
I love the way y'all explain this in the book, because I'm not a science guy, I'm more of a history theology guy. So like reading this book was sort of intimidating, but it was still easy to understand. Like the analogy used, or the history that used for the Drake equation, was a professor asked his students, how many piano tuners do you think there are in, was it Chicago?
Yes.
And so
that's an actual example. Yeah, that's actually one of that wasn't my invention. That was literally Fermi's invention. So Enrico Fermi, he was an Italian physicist, Nobel Prize winner. His students called him Il Popa because he was infallible.
Oh, wow.
Really?
That's funny.
Yeah, but he was, like I say, he was Italian. He was in fascist Italy, and when he got his Nobel Prize, he was like, okay, not going back, and ended up at the University of Chicago. And when he's teaching his physics students there, he's also doing work underneath the squash courts on the first atomic pile and first like controlled nuclear reactions. And one of the things that he would have his students do is, okay, you have a problem, you don't necessarily know how to actually calculate it, and you definitely can't go Google it. No one even knows what that word is yet. So how can you break this down into simpler chunks that you can have a reasonable assumption that this factor should influence the outcome, and you have some sense of what plausible values it could have? So exactly, yeah, the example of how many piano tuners are there in Chicago, and then thinking about the process of like, what are the factors that you can at least make estimates on? You figure, okay, it's probably somehow related to the population of Chicago, how many houses there are, how many pianos a tuner could actually tune that would actually make a decent business model, etc. So yeah, you can do that. When Frank Drake comes up with his equation in the early 1960s, he's basically treating it as a Fermi problem. All right, how many civilizations are in the Milky Way right now? So it's got to be somehow related to like how many stars and planets there are, but how many of those have life, and how many of them actually have intelligent life, and so on. And so he comes up and says, here are the factors. Now, in 1961, when he comes with this up, pretty much none of those factors in that equation are well known. And some of them, even today, are not well known. Some of them we have actually done a good amount of astronomy to limit their possibilities, and other ones you can talk to two different scientists and get three different answers.
This is why, you have the principle of garbage in, garbage out. So if you start putting, very dubious numbers into these equations, then you're going to get very dubious numbers out. Or if you look amongst the whole range of scientists, you get this massive range of numbers that can come out of, what's the probability of life existing, or how much life exists out there, etc., etc.
Yeah, and I think we successfully were able to navigate those uncertainties by actually modeling our uncertainties there. So if we say we don't actually know what this parameter is, there's actually statistical ways of dealing with a value you don't actually know, and basically doing random samples from that probability distribution. And from there, we produced our results to say our best guesstimate is we are almost certainly have neighbors somewhere in the observable universe. And if there's someone else in the Milky Way galaxy with us right now, pretty much 50-50.
Which is to say that and I love this, we did some science in this book. We actually ran some numbers. We did some proper science. I was like calculator out. I sharpened my pencil. I ran some numbers. I said, Aaron, what do you reckon of these? He went, leave it to me, mate. Jog on.
Like, I'm ready. He's just like, forget it. I got it. Don't worry about it.
I did ask him to try to be the random number generator, just get some dice and throw them, but I realized, I need to do this 1,000,000 times per parameter. This might take a little while. So I hired a different randomizer.
Did you
I could have got 5 dice, but
I was gonna say, yeah.
So so the idea is that we're, as I say, there is most probably life out there. Again, the larger you think the universe is, the more probable that life exists out there. And then we got to this point where, okay, let's settle on that. And now, what are the ramifications of that? But it might be worth talking about paradoxes involved about whether we, if there is life out there, why haven't we heard from it?
The Fermi paradox.
Aaron, scientist, Fermi paradox.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Fermi gets all the fun. The Drake equation is based on a Fermi question, and Fermi asked a question even before that when he was having lunch with other friends, and they were talking about, specifically, they were actually talking about, I think it was a New Yorker cartoon of aliens coming down and, like, I think stealing car parts or something like that. I forget the details, but this is the 1950s. UFO stuff is just, exploding in the media. And in this conversation, Fermi blurts out, well, where is everybody? If we're being constantly buzzed by UFOs and flying saucers and the like, well, how come we haven't, gotten any really good evidence of them actually, walking around us or clearly signaling us? Why is it, of course, always, the grainy photo, or the guy who had a weird bender the night before and is kind of sort of remembering what happened last night? And the more scientific version is we go and we use our scientific instruments. We use our radio telescopes, our optical telescopes, gravitational wave detectors, things like that. And so far, we have not yet found any clear signs of advanced technology. We can't even say we've actually even discovered life outside of Earth. We haven't even found it elsewhere in the solar system, let alone intelligence. So if there are these advanced civilizations out there, why have we not found them? Is it that they don't actually exist, or do they have some reason to make themselves not well known?
I've always had a consideration.
Yeah. And what were the reasons for that? Like, there's different theories about that, like the technological gap theory, then the dark forest theory. I think most people are famous or fans of. So from my understanding, again, very limited, there's this idea that technology can only advance to a certain point, and beyond that, it becomes very limited, so they can no longer harness the energy necessary to reach other said life forms. So they come up with like the Dyson sphere or the what was it, the Dyson cluster? Is that what you said in the book?
Dyson swarm.
Dyson swarm, yes.
Swarm.
There it is.
Yes.
So yeah, they use this Dyson swarm to harness. Please.
So, it might be worth. Sorry. I was going to say it might be worth Aaron like explaining that from really a basic point for the viewers. Like, why is energy? Why is it harnessing energy really important?
Yeah. So the idea that if we're talking about some sort of advanced civilization, if they have some sort of goal, they want to accomplish something, whether it's build a skyscraper, go to another planet, or reboot another beloved sci-fi franchise, they need energy. And the more energy a civilization has control of, the more advanced in some sort of scale we can have. And so there's a scale that was created by a Soviet scientist back in the mid-20th century. And so we call this scale the Kardashev scale, to name it after him. So a Kardashev scale would tell us if you are a 1 on this scale, you are able to control all the energy accessible to a planet. So like all the sunlight energy that lands on the surface of the Earth. If humanity had control of all that, we'd be a type 1 civilization. If you go to a type 2 civilization, you are able to harness and control all the energy output of an entire star, which is not a trivial increase. Our current status on the scale is that we are approximately a 0.7. Now, that sounds close to 1, but because this is actually a logarithmic scale, we would have to have literally 1,000 times more energy production to reach that. Not 1,000 more power plants, would be 1,000 more power plants per every power plant we currently have.
Wow.
Wow.
That's the fun part about logarithmic scales.
So, like, without fusion power or some other advanced tech, and also a lot of them, we are not even at a Kardashev 1 civilization. And if Kardashev 2, like I say, if it's able to build a shell and collect all the energy output of a star, this is not just trillions, this is even more than trillions of times more energy controlled than a type 1 civilization would have. Beyond that, you could also talk about type 3 civilizations that control an entire galaxy of stars. And you could even theorize beyond that, and that you get even things like Type Omega, which is basically they're gods.
Yeah.
So what?
What
Anton brings up a good question in the chat. What if the closest aliens are still in the Dark Ages?
I wanted to talk about this. So the likelihood that we are in the same place evolutionarily as someone else or another species or another planet is another. It's another factor that gets that makes the possibility of you encountering these species exponentially less likely, because there's a chance that there is life out there, but it is right now sitting in its lovely primordial soup, and it is just little RNA squigglies just doing its thing in the soup. And then there's another entire civilization that's dying, and like, I mean, it has made its full scale. There is no more they've done what we've done, and they've just killed their planet dead. Like, I mean, this could be all ongoing at the same time as we are talking right now. So timeline-wise, we're never going to be in the same spot as another planet at the same time. Because even if you do find an Earth next to another yellow star, another yellow sun, it's the likelihood that Earth has started its evolutionary jumps or process at the same time as us is, God, just infinitely unlikely.
I mean, given the size of the universe, you'd assume that there are some out there at exactly the same point, but likewise there are loads that aren't. And as you say, and indeed, you know, I mean, Aaron, you talk to this because you write there is quite a bit that we talk about with regard to expired kind of civilizations, and also talking about the good news is about finding technologically advanced civilizations. It gives us hope as well. So there's quite a few like sidebars to go off on this topic.
Yeah. So one thing we can also note that there will be actually interesting selection bias in if we do find a civilization, because if we find a civilization, they're more likely to be a long-lived civilization than a short-lived one. For the simple fact, if they're longer-lived, well, there's a longer time span that we can actually intersect. And a longer-lived civilization would also theoretically then be also more advanced than us. So if we were to bump into ETs, our initial probability would actually suggest they'd be more advanced to us on average than in their medieval state, as you would say. Now, there could still be the question, could we even possibly detect medieval or ancient aliens and not the ones on the History Channel? I mean, like, can we sit here and use our technology and not our abuse of Victorian era racism, which is what ancient aliens is?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, shots fired. Shots fired.
But not
here's
right.
one
shade.
The interesting thing. Yeah, the thing is, okay, so the main way that we are trying to find aliens is through their, signs of their technology. One of the ways maybe we could in future iterations of our tech is look for their pollution. Specifically, we have the ability to look at atmospheres of other planets and figure out what's the composition of their atmospheres. So what if we're observing this new planet, we start measuring its atmosphere and find out, hey, it's got a lot of nitrogen oxide and carbon dioxide and methane. That looks like an early industrialized civilization there.
Yeah, one of my favorite things is when people get into this topic and I'm like, yes, we get to be archaeologists for aliens. It's fun.
Thank you for the super sticker, Anton. I really appreciate that.
It's a straight up thing. You find evidence of humans, you find evidence of life. Creatures have waste.
Mm-hmm.
Although, I mean, like, then they're getting the philosophy of like, what if they don't? Well, that's a whole other thing. The likelihood of a creature existing, they need to draw in energy. Oh, yes.
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 I will also note, Ryan, we actually talked specifically about how we know the Egyptians built the pyramids. We found the receipts, literally.
Yeah, no. No. Ryan is aware. She's being facetious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ryan is well aware of this. She's a deconversion. She's deconverted from Jehovah's Witness. She has her whole.
I interviewed her on my YouTube channel.
Yeah,
we had good times.
Yeah, she's a blast.
For those who don't know, I'm a military veteran. I remember very specifically. I'll probably never forget this. Like we're all in like a bay with bunk beds lined up against the walls. And I'm laying there just like dicking around on my phone because we're done for the day. And these guys are like bundled up next to the bunk next to me. And they're talking about this whole thing. Like it's impossible that ancient Egyptians could have understood the angles necessary to. And I put my phone down. I was like,
literally dump out sand. Just dump out
really?
sand. What shape does it make?
What's more likely? That aliens visited the planet and taught them these things, or that, hey, maybe they understood geometry a little bit better than we think they did. What's
we know
more
they did.
likely here?
There are hieroglyphics that
there's
are
no
mapped.
possible way that they understood.
Well,
these
it's an
aliens.
interesting.
Aliens
It's an
must have come
interesting
and taught
segue.
them? Really?
It's an interesting segue there because well, no, it's just that what you're talking about is a form of chauvinism. That you could call that a chronological chauvinism, but actually, what we talk about quite a lot in the book is geocentrism or Earth chauvinism, where it's like we think we're better than everyone else, and like so you're talking about that in a chronological sense there, but in a geographic sense, we think we used to think we're the center of the universe. We used to think we're the center of the solar system, or it was a geocentric system, so on and so forth. But in theological terms, we are the apex of creation. And of course, what the book looks to do is turn that on its head. And in fact, one of the main vehicles that we use to evaluate where we sit in the universe in lots of different contexts is something called the Copernican principle. I don't know, Aaron, if you want to talk about the Copernican principle.
All right. So, yeah, let's talk about our friend Nicholas Copernicus.
I love Nicholas Copernicus. Let's bring him up. I love him.
All right. Now, it is worth noting that Copernicus was never persecuted for his astronomy work. In fact, his stuff was actually even used by the Catholic Church to actually refine their calculations for when Easter is, because that's a big deal, and it's ultimately an astronomical question because of the way that they were using the Jewish calendar to figure out when JC had a bad day.
JC had a bad day. JC had glaucoma.
Right. But nonetheless, in Copernicus's model, he decided to go with the fringe idea at that time that, hey, maybe the Earth isn't the center, but actually it's the Earth going around the sun, and we can actually explain the various observations of the planets by basically the Earth going around Jupiter, Venus and Mercury are close to the sun, so that's why you never see them at night, except like really close to the horizons, you never see them at midnight. The other planets are further out. It can explain some of their loop-de-loop motions as we're racing around the sun at different rates. And in that model, it also means, hey, Earth isn't the center of the universe anymore. And we now know that Copernicus was correct in that. And in fact, the sun isn't the center of the universe either. In fact, there's no real centers anywhere at all. We now have to realize that our planet, in certain ways, is in a sort of mediocre galaxy around a mediocre sun. And that principle of, unless you have evidence otherwise, you are probably closer to what the average is of some various statistical distribution than the exception. Because, quite simply, the exceptions are few, the average is many. When we are going out and searching for things, unless we have evidence otherwise, we should assume that we are something close to that average result rather than the exceptional result.
Yeah, don't put us at one end of the spectrum or another. You have to be able to branch one way. Like, you have to be able to branch in both. In all directions, I should say. And
it's so super important. It's a really vital component of the work we do in the book, which is to understand that on every kind of metric we look at, you've got to assume that we're pretty much slap bang in the middle. So when you're talking,
solid C students.
Yeah. But there are
make degrees.
there are loads of ramifications. This is where I'm going to get a bit of theology and philosophy going here. So there are loads of ways to understand it. So one of them is like, well, if we're talking about how intelligent we are, if we're more likely to be right in the middle, then there are going to be there are going to be alien life forms out there, extraterrestrial intelligences out there that are far more intelligent than us and far less as well. And likewise, when you talk about moral creatures, well, can you imagine that a creature can be more or less moral? Well, we're going to be slap bang in the middle, so there are going to be creatures that are more moral than us. And when you talk about the idea of Imago Dei, which is to say in the image of God, however you define that, is it rationality, is it intelligence, is it X, Y, Z? You know, we're made in the image of God, then we're actually going to be slap bang in the middle of that. And one of the really interesting things to think about here is that, okay, we might look at a fish and go, well, you're not made in the image of God, like we're made in the image of God. But then when we understand our place in the universe, then actually there are going to be extraterrestrial intelligences out there that are to us like we are to fish. And they're going to say, well, you're not made in the image of God, like we're the image of God, like we're super duper awesome aliens.
So okay, I'm going to use Neil deGrasse Tyson recently used this concept, and I don't believe it originated from him, but it's the concept of the idea of between us and a chimpanzee as far as intelligence is concerned. We share, 98% of our DNA with a chimpanzee, right? Approximately 98%. That 2% is enough to change. Like, you could teach a chimp to do a basic task, right? Like, move this over here, and you get a cookie, right? But in the case of like a human toddler, like the whole movement of the cookie thing, like to get a cookie is I mean, that's just basic, right, for us. Like, but if you think about it, that's like having, like, you couldn't teach a chimp trigonometry, but we can learn that in, like, you know, high school-ish age. But the next 2%, say we share 98% with another evolutionary step. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to share genetics with aliens. It'd be really cool if we did. But but if we don't, just say that's that 2% in genetic code differences as far as intelligence or capability of intelligence. Their offspring, they're young ones that would be considered toddlers at the time. They're younglings. They're foundlings.
Well, so it's almost like the logarithmic scale you're talking about. There's going to be
moving up.
Yeah.
Non-coding.
Yeah, and so as a result, that plays merry havoc with the received ideas that you get in sort of biblical history and theological thought that we are the apex of creation, right. And arguably, well, we're not if you're going to now expand to understanding the whole universe and our place in the universe.
This is where I love the movie Predator. I just love it because it's an alien that goes around and learns everything about, like, the most advanced societies so that they stay the apex. I find it fascinating. That's besides the point. So I guess I have a question in regards to Nephilim. How do you pronounce that word? I don't know.
Nephilim.
Yeah.
Nephilim. Okay. I've never really talked about this. It's kind of out of my jurisdiction normally, but would you say that the Nephilim encounter within the biblical sense could have been an encounter with an alien, or do you think that those are like?
Well, thank you, voiceover person from every episode of Ancient Aliens.
Right.
Could it be that?
I was like,
is it possible?
You know?
Just asking questions.
That Carl Sagan actually had an interesting description of that. This was known as the horny astronaut, the horny alien hypothesis. The aliens came to Earth, saw the women, and are just like, you know what? I'm down with this. Not our species. No. And we need to point out just how weird this is for multiple things. You mentioned the 2% difference between us and chimps. We're at least related. Have you ever looked at a chimp? You know, is it really a common thing to look at a chimp and say, man, look at the hips on that one? Whew.
Yeah, like,
oh,
what?
Yeah.
Sorry, but like, wow.
Or look at a baboon. It's like, wow, that baboon's behind is so red. Oh, yeah, that one wants to mate.
Is bestiality a thing?
Well, this video is going south.
Like, would we have interspecies?
That's how we do here on Nerds and Heresy.
Like, that's just weird.
Yeah,
like,
and
if nobody tabooed interspecies sex, would bestiality be like the issue that it is? Like, I'm sorry. I'm just
there's some long weeds of moral philosophy that we're gonna have to
like,
take ourselves out from here.
Well, the thing is, though, with weeds, is that we are more likely. Yeah, I should point out, you mentioned weeds. We're more likely as humans to successfully breed with weeds than with aliens, because at least we and the weeds have a common ancestor. We at least have some genetic relationship. The aliens, we don't even know if they have DNA.
Oh my God, let's talk about that.
Fair point.
Oh my God, yes. Can we talk about if aliens budded instead of like actually reproduced the way like budding, fission, just all of the things, asexual reproduction? I find it really fascinating. Like they breed only like fucking parrotfish. They would change their own sex and breed with themselves if there's like a low density population. Like what? I'm sorry. Now I'm just getting into the hypotheticals, and I love it.
You're right that I mean, heck, we see on Earth there are non-sexual forms of reproduction. There are more than 2 sexes in some species, and sometimes I think there's like dozens of possible sexes in some species. So yeah, if the aliens are out there, we don't have to assume that they're all completely, banging their version of the Bible, saying one man, one woman, or they might be saying one man, one woman, and one woman, because we have a tri-sex species, and it takes 3 people to make a baby. Who knows? That could be their world.
3's a magic number.
What if
it takes a village?
What if they bred like sponges, where they just like shoot little offspring out like a mist, and like you just have to walk through it and be like, and now you're pregnant.
But so this actually, so like as crazy as this kind of conversation might be in terms of like theology, actually, this is really important, and we're jumping all over the place here, so apologies. But
I love it.
But one of the things about this is we forgot to go through the basic. Where we go through the book, which is 1, are other aliens going to be intelligent? 2, are they going to be moral? And 3, if they're moral, are they going to be fallen in terms of like if you look at Christian theology? So are they going to do all those things? Okay, let's jump to yes. Okay, they are. And then okay, do they then number 4 is do they need atonement? Do they need some kind of payment or some kind of salvation for their fallen nature? So let's assume all that is true for an intelligent alien life form. But then you're saying, okay, do we need to have does one atonement do it all? So like one Jesus, would one Jesus pay for all of the sins of the universe, and you only need one kind of Jesus story, and that does everyone in the universe? Or do you need like billions of Jesuses existing in all these different intelligent alien life form instances? And if you and actually in astrotheology, which is the subject that we're talking about here, in astrotheology, astrotheologians are broadly split. Like some will say one Jesus to rule them all, and then others would say billions of Jesuses is the only way of making sense of this. So and the thing is, if you have or only one Jesus, then that story needs to do the job for all these different alien instances and civilizations. So then if you've got some alien that is like procreating by like spores, like, or whatever, some kind of weird way of reproducing, then and just being that, then how would you be able to empathize with that alien species that is so foreign to you? So, for example, if we were not the species, not the civilization with the Jesus, and some other tentacled, weird civilization had the Jesus, how would we be able to, if we were just had some kind of video I don't know, some kind of cinema screen that zapped down that story to us, how would we be able to empathize with and you start getting into all these kind of like thought experiments like, well, it's really difficult to be able to empathize. We're not very good at empathizing anyway amongst our own species, let alone intra-species and intra like life forms on different sort of planets. So how would we feel that story, and how would that story be, how could we make that part? It would surely be unfair if we had to access another alien life form's atonement story and they get to access their own. So if we had the Jesus on planet Earth, right, and our Jesus did it for everyone in the universe, then that arguably would convey some kind of an advantage to us in terms of being able to empathize with our human Jesus that other aliens just simply wouldn't be able to do, and have that shared history, that cultural embedded history of Christianity, for example, and Jesus. They wouldn't get to access that, and so that would be unfair. And that's a kind of iteration of the problem of evil, which is, hey, it's unfair. We get the goodies here on Earth, and all the other alien species just have to kind of watch our TV show type thing. I don't know if I explained that particularly well, but
yeah. As Christians are supposed to tell us that the story of Jesus is the greatest story ever told, and yet most of the universe doesn't get to hear it. That seems inherently unfair. And like you say, if we do the reverse thought process, if this happened on another world, if this happened on the planet of the slug people, so Jesus had to take on their bodily form, so that Jesus...
You crucify a slug.
He was salted for your sins.
Salted! I love it.
He was assaulted.
I don't think it has... Yes. I don't think it has the same...
That's a joke we missed out there, mate. We could have had that in the book.
Assaulted slug Jesus.
You can have that. It's free.
He was assaulted.
You're welcome.
He was assaulted for your sins.
Yep. Don't worry. Since I've come up with this idea, I've been saying it for all my other talks, because once you got one joke, you just repeat it until everyone hates it.
Yeah.
I don't hate it. I just keep
and it's also worth noting, when it comes to the story, if it happens here for us humans, if we are now told that we have to, tell the rest of the universe about it, that's a problem, because the whole problem of us also being quarantined by distance also means when it comes to getting the message out, well, our technology, no matter what we do, we will not be able to tell the whole universe. And when I say we won't be able to, I mean, even if we literally can go the speed of light, there are parts of the universe we cannot reach. When we talk about the observable universe, we're talking about that because that means there actually was enough time for light to get from that part of the universe to us. But there's parts of the universe that are even beyond that, but their light has not been able to reach us. And because the universe is also expanding, and that expansion is a function of distance, you get far enough away, the expansion is greater than the speed of light. There are parts of the universe that we will never see ever, ever, ever. And conversely, even if we send signals there, they'll never get that far. So if our mission is to tell the whole universe about Jesus, we cannot succeed. We literally, physically cannot do it.
It would have to be done by theological magic. There's an interesting sidebar here, Aaron. I'm sure you could express this better than I'll be able to.
Thank you again, Anton. Super sticker.
We're in the chronological Goldilocks zone. So in terms of time, we are in this range of time where if we're outside of that, we wouldn't be able to understand the universe. We wouldn't be able to understand redshift and all these kind of funky things. That because we are in this particular point in time where the universe has expanded only so far and whatever, and we can still see stuff around us to the point where we can actually understand the universe quite a bit. We are in this perfect time. But if you were a civilization that actually evolved, I don't know what the timescale would be, but another 100 million years or 10 billion years in advance of now, then they literally wouldn't be able to understand the universe in the same way. Even if they're involved to be like super intelligent like us or way more intelligent than us, then they literally wouldn't be able to understand the universe because of the way that it had expanded. That's how I understand it. I don't know if I'm correct there, Aaron.
Yeah. I think the point was first actually made by Lawrence Krauss that as the universe is expanding, and more of the universe goes beyond the horizon of what's visible, especially because the universe's expansion is increasing rather than decreasing in speed. That factor means that the horizon of what we're going to be able to see is getting smaller and smaller. So in 10, 15 billion years from now, we may not be able to see the evidence of the Big Bang or the expansion of the universe. And so the people there would make observations, they would make the best theories that they can, and come to the wrong conclusions.
But that's nothing that we discuss in the book, but nonetheless interesting.
But couldn't we then, in theory, be also not able to make the right predictions and therefore be making the wrong assumptions and coming to the wrong conclusions?
In theory, yes, but in actuality, no, because I'm right about everything.
Right. Okay, so this goes right back to the whole centricism. Got it.
I was only ever wrong once. I was only ever wrong once, and it's when I thought I made a mistake.
Well,
I like that. Can we?
Are you writing that down?
The dark forest theory.
Ooh,
dark what?
The dark forest theory. So, this is the theory in regards to the Fermi paradox. That, in a nutshell, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that basically alien life forms refuse to make contact with us because they're afraid of what might happen if we do. Like, they might make contact with us based off of what they've observed from us. They've learned that if they make contact with us, they would be like, they're going to either worship us and kill each other over how they worship us, or they're going to kill us directly. And
this is
it even goes even farther. Like, yeah. So, like, what if an alien life form tries to make contact and they land in North Korea? Well, North Korea is now going to have access to their technology. And Kim Jong-un is going to be able to use that technology to eradicate the rest of the earth. And so the aliens will be like, nah, we should probably steer clear of that for a variety of reasons.
You don't interfere with cultures that are not at your level or above. That is something that anthropologists won't do. And
please,
yet,
Aaron.
We have so many examples of doing it wrong.
Yeah. So what you're describing there, I don't think actually is the Dark Forest. Yours is closer to the Star Trek Prime Directive, which is, not to interfere with developing cultures because of all sorts of things you'll mess up. Surprisingly, I found...
Trek, to be honest.
Well, here's the thing. The best defense of the Prime Directive of Star Trek comes outside of Star Trek. It comes from season 3 of The Orville.
Yes. The Orville was brilliant. Sorry.
The Orville is basically, it's supposed to be a satirical take on Star Trek The Next Generation, but it happens to just be really good.
It turned into so much more. Like, it's a comic Star Trek, but they take some of the plots from Star Trek.
I feel like I've been missing out.
And they include modern day concepts of not theology, but of like the what ifs that we talk about nowadays in science. And
but to get back,
which episode you're thinking about. Which
Dark Forest. I was going to say Dark Forest is more game theory, and.
So the Prime Directive, or what's also, when it was first called this back in the 70s, as the zoo hypothesis, that we're some sort of sanctuary to be kept at a distance so that way we can properly develop or be observed. But that is basically the aliens are doing it somehow to our end, and also are perfectly willing to follow the rules that they don't have any teenagers who'd like to jump the fence and play with the lions, with us being the lions.
Teenager theory or whatever it's called.
Exactly. That we call the teenager problem in our book, because it's like, you tell a teenager to not do something, they're more likely to do it. Now you need to do this for an entire galaxy. There's no, drunk benders where they end up landing on random planets. It's like, this becomes very hard to police at such a scale. Now, you need to then give everyone an internal reason to not talk to each other, and the Dark Forest captures that, because it basically says, if you're the kind of civilization that makes noise, you're the kind of civilization putting a target on your back. So, the best science fiction that has made this popular actually comes from a sci-fi series out of China. The series is called Remembrance of Earth's Past. The first book in this series is called The Three-Body Problem by Liu Cixin. They've turned it into movies and TV series, and I think there's another Netflix version coming out soon for that, for English speakers. The basic idea in the second book of the series, called The Dark Forest, is the principles of exosociology. And basically you take the ideas of you're a civilization, you're out for your own survival and self-preservation. If you detect another civilization, you realize that they exist, they have advanced technology, and you should also realize, hey, they're developing, they could develop faster than you and become a threat. And if they detect you, they might also think the same thing. So basically everyone has the same thought process. The only thing that's safe to do is hide.
Oh, hide. I was going to say attack.
But the thing is, though, if you do attack, you have to make sure that you attack and absolutely you succeed. But you also have to do it in such a way that if there's an even more advanced civilization that's hiding out there, you don't happen to also be picked up on their radar. So if you start sending out a fleet of ships,
be stealthy, get out, and hide.
Exactly. Yeah, so everyone has to be as stealthy as possible. Everyone is basically a hunter in the dark forest, and anyone making a noise, anyone lighting a campfire is making themselves known to all the other hunters who have the exact same fears and need to survive.
So arguably, us sending Voyager out, us sending the fucking...
It's dangerous.
All of our satellites, yeah, it's dangerous because we are lighting the campfire. We are making the smoke signals. We're flashing.
Yeah, there are some who argue that SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, is indeed a stupid thing to do. We're just like signing our own death warrant.
Yeah.
Usually the dangerous thing isn't so much SETI, but METI, messaging extraterrestrial intelligence, which we have done multiple times. We'll literally take our satellites and beam it at a star system as loudly as we can to see, to send a signal there. Sometimes it's for publicity purposes. Like several years ago, I forget to which star system it was pointed to, but they blasted the Beatles song across the universe at that star system.
That's funny. Well, we haven't heard anything yet.
Well, fortunately, it's only going at light speed, so our radio waves have only been leaving Earth's atmosphere since...
by the time something comes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, considering that, again, the galaxy is about 100,000 light years across. So for our signals to even get to the other end of the galaxy is a geological period of time.
Yeah. No,
ain't gonna happen soon. Yeah. So when we talked about how got this progress between are we intelligent? Are aliens intelligent? Are they moral? Are they fallen? And therefore, do they need saving? So that's whole basis. So what we did in the book is take the work of two theologians called McIntosh and McNabb, and they wrote a paper that looked at 6 areas of theism, their Christian theism, and said, right, these are the problems that could be presented to Christians given the discovery of intelligent alien life. And we're going to look at these 6 problems, and they conclude in their paper that they wrote that, of these 6 problems, none of them present an issue for the Christians. So therefore, discovering intelligent alien life is fine by us. And we wrote, I wrote an essay on this, or we wrote an essay on this back some time. And we thought, well, actually, let's make the book of this and use that paper with the six points as the guide to what we how we structured the book. So where the main kind of philosophical middle part of the book is looking at these 6 arguments and the 6 areas, which are is the discovery of ETI a challenge to theism in general, just not necessarily Christianity, but the idea of does God exist? Does ETI challenge Christian scriptures? So looking at the Bible, what does the Bible have to say? Does it challenge Christian doctrine, so the theology that comes out of the Bible and that has been developed? Does discovery of ETI challenge Christian tradition? Does it challenge the problem of evil? Does it make the problem of evil more problematic? And then finally, the Christian narrative, which is slightly different to the other points. So those are the 6 main areas that we look at in the book, and we conclude, as you can imagine, being skeptics, we conclude slightly differently to the Christian theologians and say that actually it does present a problem, and a lot of what we use is abductive reasoning. So abductive reasoning is the inference to the best explanation. So you get deductive reasoning, like all men are mortals, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is immortal, and that's indubitably true if you agree with the premises it follows, like so on and so forth. So it's a valid argument with the sound premises, blah blah blah. And then you got inductive reasoning, which is like, all the swans I've ever seen are white, therefore all swans are white, except, and that's really useful, and we use that every day, but it doesn't mean it's indubitably true, because actually you might find a black swan and go, oh shit, turns out that I was wrong. But it's a kind of probability kind of assessment and whatnot. And then you get inference to the best explanation, which is, okay, we've got competing hypotheses. So let's say on the one hand, God exists, and on the other hand, God doesn't exist, or Christian omni-God exists. And by omni-God, I mean all-loving, all-powerful, and all-knowing, divine foreknowledge, all that kind of stuff. So Christian omni-God exists, Christian omni-God doesn't exist. And so when we look at all these kind of data points, the question is, which hypothesis does it better support? It's not like it's not going to disprove God, but if we're going to pile this stuff in, and this stuff on balance better suits the hypothesis, better supports the hypothesis that Christian omni-God doesn't exist, then actually this is meaningful. And we conclude essentially that looking at all of these arguments, on balance, each of them better supports, naturalistic atheism than Christian omni-God theism. And so there you go. So those are the 6 areas, and I don't know if it's worth dipping into any of them particularly. Sorry, it's a lot of me talking.
That's what we're here for.
No, that was good.
I should also add one thing, is that those were the 6 areas, but we also found areas of doctrine that they failed to go into that we explored. In particular, how does eschatology work with their system? That if there's supposed to be a new heaven and a new earth when Jesus comes back, if there's also multiple Jesuses, are there going to be multiple new heavens and new earths? And I come up with an interesting way of not looking just for technosignatures, signs of advanced technology, but came up with a new word, theosignatures. Can we find a planet that has actually been transformed and become the new heaven and new earth that's described in Revelation? Or if I use more Mormon terminology, a planet that has been celestialized?
I was about to say, I was going to be like, we're
Mormon,
getting
Mormonism use that term?
Joseph Smith. It's like, yes, this is the celestial kingdom. This is the highest one. It's first in this particular solar system. This is where you're going to end up if you have many wives and do all the things right, and have all the children, all the things.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I just watched the freaking series, the Keep Sweet and Pray, or Pray and Obey. It's
the one about the LDS,
FLDS,
FLDS. Yeah, that's mental. An article.
Well, what's freaky to me is I've driven by that fucking place like twice, and I couldn't figure out like what it was. I was like, that sounds familiar, and that was back when I was like, I don't know, 21, 22. Before I really got into like looking into other religions, just kind of was sticking with my science and just letting it stay. But yeah, and then I was just like watching it, and it was just like, oh, I've been there. That's weird.
Could have been sucked into that cult.
Funny enough, though, if we do have to talk about Mormonism, we should also, and we do treat it separately from a lot of the other Christian theology, but the Mormons of the various sects of Christianity are probably going to be the most on board with discovering aliens, because right in the early documents, Joseph Smith and company were very pro-alien.
Joseph Smith's a wild card, man. He had some real interest. He was out there.
Like Mormonism started like 3 people ago. Like it started
whole
in
generation.
the 1800s. Like these were not like Joseph Smith wasn't an ancient goat herder like Jesus was,
literally,
or whoever else.
The FLDS started like the generation after Joseph Smith. Like
my great grandfather could look at Joseph Smith and be like, "Yeah, he was full of shit."
Well, it reminds me of the old William Lane Craig sort of arguments, relying on people like, was it Sherman White, the historian, saying stuff like, "Oh, Christianity evolved too quickly to being, based on like the lack of truth. It had to be true because of how quickly it developed." It's like, hang on, mate, have you seen how quickly the Moonies and the LDS developed? And that ain't working.
Have you seen how fast Scientology? When did Scientology start? It's only been one lifetime, right?
Basically, it starts in the 50s, 60s.
Too long.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, it's already been too long, but like it caught on.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you attach money to it.
Money and blackmail.
Yeah, but Mormonism spread faster than Christianity or Islam, like by a long shot, I think.
Well, that's because it's true.
Well, they also cut themselves off from everybody as soon as they did. Like
that's what they would say.
They adsorbed people and then absorbed them.
Well, I mean, I always think about things like Christianity having I wrote a big feature article on this actually, the carrot and stick morality, which is the if you are offering the greatest thing in human conception, like there's nothing greater than you can imagine that's better than heaven. You know, heaven is like perfection, right? So that you can't imagine something better than heaven, because otherwise that would be heaven, right? And likewise, you can't imagine anything worse than hell, because otherwise that would be hell. So therefore, heaven and hell are these twin bribes that sit on your shoulder if you're a Christian or other similar like theist, that really bribe you into blackmail you into staying in that religion. And then when you add in things like, you know, Scientology, not Scientology is a bit different because they don't have those beliefs, but things like in Mormonism, where you've got a load of, and any kind of cultish religion where you've got a load of psychology and stuff going on, and like daytime bribery with family and all this, and etc. etc. There's no way of getting out of this whole prison of belief, because, you know, if I get out, I'm not going to go to heaven, and I'm going to go to hell. So I'm forgoing the best thing I can possibly imagine, and I'm going to be in the worst thing I can possibly imagine. And while I'm on Earth, I'm getting ostracized by X, Y, and Z. So yeah, I'm going to stay in this thing. And
okay, psychology. I have a what if for you. Say miraculously, I hate using that word when we're talking about religion and shit, but like miraculously, all the statistics happen, and we do end up encountering a alien species that actually lives in a planet that has like excess amounts of oxygen and is like pleasant and has tons of all the things. And the thing is, oxygen so toxic to them, they're looking for a carbon-based, like a solid carbon like environment. Would we switch planets? Like a tradesy?
Well, there is actually a danger of having too high of oxygen in the atmosphere.
Like the idea is like if their planet is what we see as heaven, are only the Christians gonna go?
Would the Christians want to colonize that planet?
In some ways, we actually
get there in the first place.
I actually, in our book, we kind of imagined the reverse thing. If aliens came here and they could perform all of the great deeds that, the heroes of the past could do. I mean, when people said that thunder was a god, if the aliens could come here, and from my math calculations, they have the energy levels equivalent to a force of nature. So if aliens could get here, they basically would be gods to our level by comparison.
Arthur C. Clarke's third law. So any technology sufficiently advanced to you appears like magic.
Exactly. And so if they can come here and not only have magical powers, but also do them to great benefit to us, if they are able to, it's like, we're going to turn the desert and have it grow wheat without any need of extra water. We're going to, help end war, and we're going to extend life and end cancer and all these things. It's like, literally, if they can bring heaven on earth, why would you even then need these religions of a promised heaven if the aliens are literally bring it to you on a silver platter? So that's one of the things that we suggest in the book. It's like, maybe even atheists would start worshiping the aliens, because the aliens are at least doing what the gods were claimed to have done in the past, but do in reality.
Like actual real gods here. I mean, these dudes are like exist. They're in front of our faces.
Exactly. So, yeah. It's like, yeah, well, why would you be an atheist if the gods are right in front of you and they're saying, by the way, we can extend your life another for 300 years if you take a seat here. It's like, yeah, I'll take a seat there. I'll convert, quote unquote.
Sure. Why
not? I always think of
yeah.
Sorry, but I always think of the Watchmen. Dr. Manhattan is an atheist, but he achieves these otherworldly powers by being locked in the microwave or whatever. But he's an atheist, and at the end of like all the drama in the comics, he goes, "I think I'm gonna leave this galaxy, and maybe I'll go create life somewhere else." Because he has the power to do that now. Even though he is an atheist, he becomes himself a god by creating people.
Like, but he doesn't want to be worshipped.
That is equally as plausible. What if Christians are worshiping Dr. Manhattan right now? That is just as plausible as any other explanation out there. Like, fight me.
No, because you're using the wrong science fiction. This was better put forward by Isaac Asimov in his short story, The Last Question, where the computer Multivac, who then goes through set iterations, basically is asked a question sometime in the not too distant future. Is there some way to reverse the second law of thermodynamics and reverse entropy? At the time, the computer says insufficient data for a meaningful conclusion. The book goes through several more thousands and thousands and thousands of years of the computer and civilization developing, but coming back to this question, is there something to be done to ultimately save the universe? Because according to the second law, basically everything is winding down. After enough amount of time, the universe will become cold, black, and perfectly uniformly dead everywhere, given enough time. Is there some way to reverse that? Multivac is asked this question, and then after bazillions of years going by, it finally figures things out, gathers things together, and then the book ends with Multivac saying, "Let there be light."
Wow. What?
But
you
actually,
haven't read that? Oh, it's good. It's good.
It's quite interesting.
And
because,
if I need to make one last quick personal connection for this story, because I presented the story as a planetarium presentation when I worked at as a show presenter at Michigan State, and the narration was provided by Leonard Nimoy, who played Spock. The uniform I'm wearing, it's all connected.
Yeah.
Aww, that's so sweet.
I was going to say something, but I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. But as I do have multiple sclerosis, and sometimes that happens. It's just like suddenly, boom, and it's gone.
The entropy does strike back. It's true.
But I will mention. I mean, it's not particularly to do with anything, but fine-tuning argument. We bring. We talk about that a little bit as a kind of sidebar. It's not necessarily to do with. Well, it kind of is to do with alien life, right? So, fine-tuning argument's interesting because Christians go, or theists in general might go, look at all of the numbers here, the constants, the physical constants, and life is here. Life is on Earth. We're clinging on. It's just right to make this one like.
If the Earth was like just a few feet farther from the sun, none of this
exactly. It's just right, and you're like, and that proves God exists. And then you go, yeah, but if the universe was teeming with life, life was on every planet and every moon you went to. Life was absolutely everywhere. The theists would go, and look, this universe is perfectly designed for life because it's thriving. It's everywhere, rather than just clinging on. And actually, there's more black holes and stuff. You're more likely to die. So what the theist does is they take control. They take control of both ends of the spectrum, and they say life is just clinging on. It's really difficult, and actually, if anything was ever so slightly different, we'd all be dead. Therefore, God exists. And then life is so easy. There's just life everywhere. Everywhere. Look, there's life. Life is amazing. There's loads of it. Therefore, God, God designed this universe for life.
Moving the goalpost. Like every time, somebody would be like, "Yeah, but what if this?" They'll be like, "Well, yeah." Then God would exist because this. And it's like, oh, well, I guess we're going to move it again.
Yeah, it's heads you win, tails I lose. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No matter what.
And then when you point out there's been like 5 or 7 mass extinction events on our planet, like our own species at one point was dwindled down to maybe 20,000.
If you don't count the double.
Yeah, like when you point that out, you're like, oh, yeah, the planet's perfectly designed for life, except 99.8% of the life to ever live on this planet has gone extinct. So
that's because the dinosaurs were just so full of sin, they just had to be wiped out.
Right. Yeah. My Ewok showed up.
But that's what they have to say. That's what they have to say. The dinosaur, the fossils were put here. They'll just ignore like 5 billion years of our universe's history altogether. Like, yeah, none of that actually happened. It's only 6,000 years old. That way, they don't have to deal with all of that. Right. They don't have to deal with the Theodicy that happened prior to 6,000 years ago. They can just deny it ever happened in the first place. It's an exercise in convenience every single time.
But Yeah, there's also lots to be said about design there as well. So let's take the Adam and Eve story. So let's assume that all aliens exist, loads of aliens existing in different places of the universe, and they're all intelligent, or there's lots of intelligence, and there's lots of moral creatures, and they all fall because there's an interesting, actually, as a sidebar here. So this is something we talk about, which is like if you say there are lots of other moral alien life forms out there, and they don't all fall, they don't all need saving, they don't all sin and make the same kind of choices, then what you're saying is that actually what we could question, why is that? Well, that's a bit unfair. Why is it that we're the ones that fell and had this worse kind of situation than all these other aliens? So you've got to kind of argue that everyone's in the same boat here, because otherwise it seems like God is really unfair. So okay, all these different alien life forms sin, they're all moral, they sin, and they need saving. But then you look at things like the literal Adam and Eve story, and you say, okay, well, does this one story do it for everyone? Are there lots of Adam and Eve stories going on in every single instance of intelligent alien life? And then you get onto the classic sort of dilemma, which is that, okay, and this argument works just as well for the Earth Adam and Eve as for like all the Adam and Eves. But if Adam and Eve are representative of humanity, so Ricky, if you were substituted for Adam, right, and you did exactly the same as what Adam did, and in fact we could substitute any human being and they would make that same mistake in the Garden of Eden, then God looks like a very poor designer, because God has designed an entire species of people, or billions of species, that just make really shit decisions, and then you get the fall. Or the other,
he did. That's absolutely what he did.
But that's the other option, which is if we substitute Ricky in for Adam, Ricky actually doesn't make that decision, or Nat in for Eve, they don't make that decision, and actually they're still living in the Garden of Eden, like in some kind of like Edenic paradise, right? So in that case, like if you would be able to be substituted and you wouldn't make that decision, but Adam and Eve did make that decision, then we are getting punished on somebody who's non-representative of us. So you've got the two horns of the dilemma, is that either God is a really crap designer and has designed us so that everyone makes really crap decisions and falls, including all the billions of aliens as well, or God has put someone in place that we are getting punished on the basis of their decision, and they are non-representative of us. And Ricky and Nat wouldn't have made that decision, in which case God is unfair. And there doesn't seem to be, there's no excluded middle there. There seems to be the dilemma. Either God is a really bad designer, or God is unfair.
I would have eaten from both trees, just to be fair, and probably would have just taken the snake as a friend. Been like,
you say that though, but if you have to eat from the tree of knowledge to actually know that's a good idea first, there's a circularity problem.
Either way, I still would do it. The snakes is like, hey, you should have an apple, and be like, fuck yeah, apple. Like,
apple pie. I'm gonna make cider. No, actually, look, like Aaron's
gonna invent alcohol.
Yeah. Anyway. Aaron's point is really, really good, because I mean, when you look at the Adam and Eve story, you've got to work out, and this, you know, we talk about this in the book because it actually pertains to, well, how do the other moral creatures around the universe act? Is it the same kind of Adam and Eve situation? Is it a literal understanding of the story that's important, or is it a metaphoric understanding, symbolic understanding? But it's odd that they are told not to eat from the tree of good and knowledge of good and evil, so they have no knowledge of good and evil. So God's divine command there not to eat is a morally neutral thing. Is like makes no difference.
It was completely arbitrary to them.
Yeah, and so therefore they shouldn't be punished on account of, because they don't know right and wrong. So they haven't done wrong because they literally have no knowledge of right and wrong. So the whole story is complete nonsense.
Like dropping someone off in the middle of New York City that can't read English. Have fun.
Yeah. Like, even still, I've got 4 small boys. If I put like a cinnamon bun on the counter and I was like,
it will be gone.
Don't touch that.
You don't know which one.
They're going to touch it. Why would I even put that there? Like, I'm a good enough parent to know that if I put that there, no matter what, I'll take your tablets away, I'll put you in the corner. Like, no matter what disciplinary action I say is going to happen, they're going to ignore that and go, stick their finger in that cinnamon bun, at least. Like,
I
why
need to
would
also
you
be a
as
little
loving
bit of a.
parent do that? You're setting them up.
If I could also throw in
clearly.
if I could throw in a personal anecdote, even taking out
Please.
the idea of temptation, as a former child, children are stupid. And I can give an example of that. I remember my parents had an electric stove. One of the burners was on, and me as a kid was trying to figure out which burner is on. And I decided the best way is to feel which one's the hot one.
Yeah.
So first one, no. Second one, no. Third one, no. Now you'd think if I were really smart, hey, I figured out it's not those three, so it's probably this one. But nope, what do? Stupid 5-year-old Aaron is doing that. So if we can make stupid mistakes even without temptation, all the more so if you say, oh, and by the way, this will give you everything in the universe that you could ever possibly want. I'm going to probably even do that just by being a stupid idiot because, again, that's what 5-year-old Aaron was like. I don't want to meet 5-year-old Aaron. I would just slap myself, I think. It's like, no, why would you think that?
Why is your thought process not functional?
My dad has told me this story before. Like when I was, I think actually 5 as well. I kept trying to like touch the stove because it was glowing. It was like an electric one, or maybe it was gas.
Exactly.
I don't remember. But it was glowing red, and I kept trying to touch it. And he was like, "No, don't." And he said 4 or 5 times. He kept pushing me away. He's like, "No, don't." And I kept like, and he was just like, "All right, go ahead." And then I did, and he was like, "Yeah, maybe next time you listen to me." Right? I wasn't trying to be mean to you and stop you from doing something you wanted to do. I was trying to stop you from doing that because I knew it was going to hurt you. So maybe now, next time, you'll listen to me. And I've had similar interactions with that with my kids.
Mm.
Like they think I'm lying to them about it. Like, don't touch that. Don't stick your finger in there. Don't shove that metal thing in that outlet. You'll get electrocuted.
That does not go in that orifice.
Well, there's actually a really interesting sidebar here you can have. Again, nothing particularly to do with the topic of conversation, but to what you're saying there. So evolution would favor children who, or just humans that listen to their elders, right? Because it's a shortcut to like information. And if you assume it's true, then it could save your life. So, for example, if you're saying to your kid, don't eat that red berry, because if you eat that red berry, it's going to kill you. And you've got a choice as a kid. Well, I could just, whatever, Dad, I'm going to eat that red berry. Or I could believe my dad. And actually, if it is indeed poisonous, then the child that goes against what the elder said is more likely to die. And so, therefore, evolution selects in for listening to your elders, which is how things like religions can maintain themselves over a long period of time. They don't necessarily have to be. It's kind of like a misfiring of evolution. It doesn't necessarily have to be correct or anything. But if your elders are telling you this is the case, and if you don't do that, you're going to go to heaven. And if you do that, you're going to go to you're going to go to hell. And if you do that, you're going to go to heaven. You throw all these things in, and then you've got this evolutionarily evolved characteristic that you will believe your elders, then that explains why things like why we're good at listening to our elders and believing our elders when sometimes we should be more skeptical. I don't know, that's just a random sidebar.
And why it gets so heavily reprimanded.
I was going to say, we unintentionally cause, I want to say natural selection, but in truth, it's unintentional selective evolution that we are causing. It's that our offspring that listen will hopefully have better chances of survival. Now, it also goes controversially. If you are a parent and you give the child all the instructions in the world and the child follows all the instructions and then the parent dies, did the child learn anything? Like, really? Because then they're just fearful of everything. So they survive. It turns into a stylized type of selection where you have obedience and you have curiosity. And without curiosity, new things can't be learned. You end up with a society that is very strict and boxed, and you are all within it. And those that have the curiosity to go outside the box will be shunned. But high risk, high reward. If they're shunned and they end up finding lots of food, suddenly their society box opens. It's ongoing. I have a very needy dog. I am sorry. This is
well, actually, we can also bring that back to the topic, because one of the questions we also consider is, what is alien psychology and possible religious beliefs going to be like? Because, I mean, we could say it's going to be so alien from us that we couldn't possibly understand it. On the other hand, if they also have like the same kinds of evolutionary pressures that led to our intelligence, it could be the case that there is some sort of ballpark equivalence, though there will be some level of spectrum. So, we don't come hard with any conclusions, because, it's really hard to do that without, having them lay down on the couch and do, a Freudian conversation with the aliens to learn about their psychology. But nonetheless, we figure the diversity of humans, of human cognition, has to be at least equal to what the aliens would have. The aliens are going to have at least as much difference from us as we have from each other. So in terms of moral behavior, listening to parents, curiosity, religious belief. We have some people who are super superstitious and religious, and some people who just don't even have the concept of impersonal minds.
But
we have that diversity amongst humans.
What if they are a hive mind? They are all one mind. Sorry, I have a fear of that one. Like, if we were to come across a species that is a hive mind, we're fucked. Like, I hate to say it, but
bees or ants.
A bit like Last of Us type thing.
Yeah, very much.
So basically, you are like Nicolas Cage. No, not the bees.
Not the bees! Anything but bees! Sorry. Yes, I know that.
I don't get that reference, so I'll just.
It is from a deleted scene from the remake of The Wicker Man.
Wicker Man.
Right.
It's so bad.
It was memed very heavily in the 2000s.
Not the bees!
We looked a little bit at like whether theism is challenged by alien belief in the discovery of intelligent alien life. Aaron, you've got quite a lot to say on, so moving to like scriptures and whether the scriptures tell us anything about, or whether discovery of intelligent alien life is kind of contradictory to our understanding of, say, Christian scriptures. There are two things in the Bible that just make me completely disregard the Bible off the cuff almost. One of them is slavery. It's like, you've got slavery so wrong that I don't need to take you as seriously as a book anymore. You were that wrong on slavery, and it's that obvious as a kind of moral situation that I'm sorry, you've ruined your case. That I should take you seriously.
Fucked up, Bible.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You had your chance and you blew it at a really simple thing.
I don't like you anymore. You're out.
As I always say, Moses should have come down from like Mount Sinai with the tablets, and I always say this: he should have come down with brought out the first tablet and said, number one, in capital letters, because it's that important. God says, "Don't do slavery," and then number two, he says, "No, really, don't do slavery. Really, pay attention to number one. It's that important." It would be that simple, and then everyone would be like, "Yeah, slavery's bad. We agree, slavery's bad." I don't even have to understand why it's bad. Just God's just
don't
really told us it is.
Everyone is equal. When in question, refer to one. Or two.
Yeah. And but it doesn't do that, so it gets that wrong. Anyway, so I ditched the Bible just on that. I mean, yeah, I've written books on like exegesis and stuff. That obviously I don't just give up there, but I really could just give up on slavery. And the second one is biblical cosmology, and this is really pertinent to this book here, which is it gets the understanding of the cosmology so damned wrong that either God is lying to us, or it's in the best interest. Like, it's God's lying to us, right? And if this is his actual revelation, there's deception going on. So the question is the deception for a greater good? It's kind of a problem of evil situation, or is the deception just, I don't know, just abhorrent? But anyway, it's so wrong on biblical cosmology. You can just ditch a Bible on that. So Aaron, you're the expert on biblical cosmology.
Fuck the Bible. Sorry.
Yeah.
Don't spit up your drink. Don't waste it.
Because if one is trying to, reconcile the belief in the existence of aliens with especially a literalistic reading of the Bible, Old or New Testament, what kind of cosmology does it present? Does it even have space for aliens? I mean, is there literally a place the aliens could actually be? If you go to the Old Testament cosmology with the flat earth, the sky dome that's made of metal with the waters above that, and everything above that is just basically singing angels and God, well, where are the other planets? The stars are literally just little lights put into the firmament, and they're basically there just to act as a calendar for God's people on Earth. So it's like there is literally no place for planets for other worlds. The stars are just lights in the sky. There are no exoplanets. There's no place for ET. Everything above the firmament is either angels or water.
but at this moment, I'm sorry, I have to say this because fucking Moses is in the Old Testament, right? So Moses is in the Old Testament. That means Exodus happened, which I will get into that a whole other time.
I'm writing a book on that, but yeah.
Oh yeah, no. If you want to discuss it, because I'll throw in archaeology shit with you about why it's not a thing. But say Moses exists, right? They have the Egyptians. The Egyptians are in charge, right? Okay, you following my logic here? They had constellations. They knew things were moving in the sky. 3,000, almost 4,000 years ago in Egypt, with their simple minds. The aliens told them, of course. But if this exists, if this Bible was written, Moses is in this culture with a bunch of Jews that are apparently enslaved due to, I don't know, cultural differences, but, not existing in Egypt at the same time, they would still, you would get a shift in understanding, like, oh, the Egyptians believe in this. That means this is a thing that happens. You would have that cultural mentality, even with like the whole master slave concept. Like, you would still look at the stars and they would overhear, that's this constellation. This is Horus. This is Eris. This is like, you would have that. And we hear none of it in the Bible. And it's just that absence is another reason why I'm like, they were never fucking in Egypt. That wasn't a thing.
Well, one of my favorite arguments is the idea that you and again, this is nothing to do with the book we're talking about now, but you go through the whole Exodus story as an Egyptian, right? And you've got all your firstborn dying, you've got cattle dying, you've got all the 10 plagues, you've got your Pharaoh saying no, and all this having his heart hardened by God, blah blah blah. So you've got all this prima facie, in your face evidence that God exists, like that God, Yahweh exists, right? And you're like, oh my God. And then suddenly, all the Israelites go, well, they're not Israelites yet, but all of the Hebrews go and they leave the land. And then suddenly everyone's like, whew, is that time? Better get on with continuing to believe all our Egyptian gods then, because that was a weird 10 minutes, wasn't it?
Why the fuck isn't there a story
even goes as
about
far as to
how
say
half
we were better off?
Yeah, why isn't there a story in Egyptian culture? Because they would have written this down, that half the population left, and with them left gods.
Yeah,
because obviously shit happened.
That was like that's genuinely like Pharaoh's surely going like, yeah, you are you are God, because I'm speaking to you and you've hardened my heart and this has all gone crazy or whatever. Like God, that God clearly exists if you're in that Exodus story. Like, and all the Egyptians, like half their country's been devastated. Like, it's absolute mayhem. And like Yahweh belief is never heard of after that, or during that, or at any point in that. Like, no Egyptian has actually believed. You don't get people believing in Yahweh or the Jewish God until there's a desperate community living there, like 1,000 years later.
And even then, the Egyptians describe it incorrectly, but they do describe Yahweh in another hieroglyphic, talking about that timeline when there were people settled there, like as an emergency, like as refugees. That concept is mentioned with it. Why wouldn't it be mentioned beforehand? Like, they had to create a word for Yahweh at that time. Why wouldn't they just
ridiculous.
Go back to
That's a big
ridiculous.
That whole thing's a big criticism I have on modern day apologetics. Is
yeah.
in the Old Testament you have God leading
else
the
but the
Israelites with a pillar of
explain why I
fire
don't
at night, the pillar of cloud by day, like God is leading the Israelites with a fire tornado. You know, if I lost my wallet and I prayed and I was like, where, and God led me to my wallet with a fire tornado, I'd be like, okay, cool. And then you get the New Testament. Doubting Thomas is like, Jesus, I see you're alive, even though you clearly died. I don't buy it. Let me stick my fingers in the holes in your hands, and then I'll believe. And Jesus is like, okay, yeah, sure, go ahead. You believe now? Yeah, it's like Jesus provided all the evidence he needed. Now today, you have apologists saying there's evidence for God in quantum wave fluctuation. Like, I have to learn about quantum wave fluctuation to find evidence for the existence of God? That wasn't a thing in the Bible. In the Bible, God was not shy.
When you're talking about like
hiding.
When you're talking about writing, it's audience purpose task or audience purpose form. So any writer is going to be considering who their audience is, what their objective is, so what their purpose is for doing that writing, and then that will inform what they write, the content of what they write. So when you look at either the Exodus accounts as like the question we should all be asking from an like anthropological point of view is, what's this trying to tell us? What was the objective of the writer in this case? So with John writing about, poking fingers in Jesus' hands, what is the intention that's going on there? So
definitely a kink. It was totally a kink.
So this was about, I would say this is about stamping down. This is why you had a development of the empty tomb narrative, which is to argue against the two-body resurrection hypothesis that Paul believed originally, by saying that actually what you have here is a bodily resurrection. Jesus resurrected as a body, which is why there's an empty tomb. There wasn't originally an empty tomb. Paul said nothing about an empty tomb. Mark, it kind of finished there, and then Matthew had guards, and this narrative developed, and then you have like poking holes in Jesus, because that is, what is that doing? Jesus is eating broiled fish. He's having his body poked. This means that it is a body. So the objective writer there
in the Garden of Gethsemane.
I gotta agree with Seven McCaw's jaw.
He was a fleshly being. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I have to agree with Seven McCaw's jaw. It's a constant search for new hidey spots. Yeah, you have to know where it can hide.
Mm-hmm. I also want to hop on the point about audience, because this also brings us to another alien theological problem. So, as was being mentioned, the cosmology of the Bible doesn't even allow for the space for aliens to exist. Now, the argument can be, and it's a very common thing in theology, that the message that God provided had to accommodate to the limitations of his audience. So in the same sort of way, when I was teaching high school physics, I don't just start the day off by writing Einstein's field equations for general relativity. That's not going to help them understand F equals ma, or that these very basic laws of motion. We have to start at something that they're going to be able to understand and appreciate first. So in the same way, God has to accommodate his message to the beliefs that existed at that time. So the argument would be, well, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the more ancient Greeks had flat earth cosmology, sky dome cosmologies. That's how the message needs to be packed away. So of course, it's not going to allow for those sorts of aliens and expectations, because these are not the things the audience could have understood. That's the argument. But the ancient Greeks did have beliefs in aliens.
Yes.
In particular, in one of the letters of the famous philosopher Epicurus, also famous for basically the oldest formulation of the problem of evil, in one of his letters, he's basically saying, hey, in our understanding of how cosmology, physics works, he was an atomist, and in the idea that atoms are just, bouncing around, flying through the void, and the different ways that they interact and bounce with each other gives you all the different properties, and it's just a whole bunch of random stuff. And again, if you got an infinitely large universe with an infinite amount of time and an infinite number of things bumping into each other,
eventually you get touch eventually.
Yep. And so he's like, hey, there's going to be other worlds with other life forms on them. So we have, in the 3rd century BC, at least one person already talking about, hey, this is something we should expect. And apparently this wasn't an unpopular idea in the 2nd century AD. One of the books written by Lucian Samosata, he writes this book called The True History of the True Story. which is just a whole bunch of like nonsense stories there, but it includes traveling to the moon and finding that there's a kingdom on the moon, and all the different bodies in the solar system are populated, and they're having this big war with each other about who's going to like control the morning star. So you have like the solar people who are like giant spiders, and you have cabbage head people all like fighting in sword battles and forming phalanxes to fight each other in space. This was something being written in the 2nd century AD. So the idea that aliens existed was not only a philosophically sound idea for these ancients, but it was even a popular idea to make fictions with. How could the Bible not accept that possibility?
We have to think about the culture that provided in, because that concept was allotted for.
Yes.
Because if that same belief went towards a mono or what do you call it, an omni god, that wouldn't fall. That wouldn't fly. Like as soon as they wouldn't like that idea. But because it's I about said pathogen. I was doing stormwater and like ecology shit today. The pantheon of multi-gods and multi-tiered gods gives you that ability to create and expand and be like, yes, and this pantheon has a cousin pantheon that is this other Earth that's out west. Like
I think
I
think it also puts paid to this idea of progressive revelation, a bit like the slavery issue. Like when you say to Christians, well, why didn't Moses or God reveal that slavery was dead wrong then? It's they weren't ready for it. They didn't quite understand it there. Yeah. And it's the same with what Aaron's saying there, which is like, why didn't God actually accurately portray the universe as it is, or at least somewhat as it is? And it's like, well, the people wouldn't have understood it at the time, and he was just playing to his audience. And Aaron's correctly said, well, actually that's bullshit, because his audience, clearly there were people contemporaneous to that would have understood a more accurate understanding of the cosmology.
Yeah, so that's the big problem. And it's also not just that the audience could have understood it. The biblical authors pretty much went out of their way to reject it knowingly. So, for example, we know that kids were taught when they were, learning Greek, the basics of cosmology, including the roundness of the earth. And we know the biblical authors did that because they quote from those school textbooks. In the book of Acts, Paul actually quotes a line from Aratus Phenomena, which was this didactic poem to teach you the basics of astronomy.
Yeah.
So basically, he's showing, hey, I paid attention in school, I read this book, I can recite it to you, and yet, what does the Bible give us? Flat eartherism.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, so they had an audience that could have understood a more scientifically accurate thing. Even the ancients had a more accurate view than what the Bible provides. The Bible instead provides stories and ideas that reject that, and that rejection led to further errors and even the murder of people. In particular, Bruno. He was killed because his beliefs went against the theology at that time, and that theology was justified by the readings of the Bible. And when I say theologians, I'm talking about people who were saying no to the plurality of worlds. I'm talking St. Augustine. Called it straight up a heresy. Thomas Aquinas gave multiple reasons, both biblical and at that time physical reasons, for why the earth is the only place that's going to be inhabited like this. Multiple popes condemned the multiplicity of worlds, and that's ultimately why it was one of the charges against Bruno. They read their Bible, they deduced that, and they had some of the same theological problems that we're talking about here. If there's multiple worlds, do we need multiple Jesuses? That seems ridiculous. There can't be multiple worlds. So that logic led to the death of at least one person.
And the question is, why would God use that knowingly, with the perfect divine foreknowledge, knowingly use the Bible as the optimal form of revelation, knowing that it was at least to some degree deceptive and inaccurate? And indeed that people would read the Bible, create their theologies from that, talking about Augustine here and Aquinas, and then, perpetuate this incorrect understanding of the universe that would indeed lead someone to be executed for a more accurate understanding of the universe. So, when you start introducing this omni-God with the idea of divine foreknowledge and using the Bible as the optimal form of revelation, then you've got a whole bunch of problems.
Why don't we talk about
I had the same thought, Bart.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a Disney
Yes.
reference here?
Yes, from Encanto.
We don't talk
Yeah, I was like, I was about to interrupt and be like, no, we don't talk about Bruno. No.
Yeah, let's all agree to just let it go. Let it go.
Oh,
Let it go.
no, let's not do. I know Disney own Star Wars, right?
Instead.
Jesus wept.
And
So
cried, and he laughed,
Right.
and he cried, and he danced for a really, really, really good time. Sorry.
where I was going to go next was the problem of particularity. So, for those who don't know what the problem of particularity is, that this is an issue in the world as it is, with just the world and not the whole universe. But the idea is that you've got this very parochial holy book with a load of parochial rules and very particular stories that are very, like, they don't really speak to everyone around the world. So if you went to a tribe in the Amazon rainforest and you try to talk about, circumcision or like what happened in the Exodus story, this and that, it's very particular to that place and that time. It doesn't really speak to them very much. And then you get what's called the scandal of particularity, which is the idea that you can only access God through Jesus. So there's no other way of accessing God. So therefore, that kind of story of Jesus in the Bible is the only way to get true salvation, etc., etc. So you've got these ideas that are very particular to the Bible and to belief in the true God. And then how does that work when you then expand the universe out to include billions of other civilizations? Like, what does circumcision mean? Like now, for me, circumcision is a ridiculous thing to ask. Why would God design men and this species and say, oh, by the way, you got to lop off the end of the penis I've designed for you, that kind of thing. So, but then what does that mean to, like, what are these 613 mitzvah rules in the Hebrew Bible? What do they mean to alien life forms out there? Like, what kind of moral teaching is this if it's so particular to this time and place and parochial that actually there's no universal kind of learning that we can take for that and expand that out to alien life forms?
We have a lot of questions indeed. If the planet of the Echidnas wants to convert to Judaism and they're told they have to circumcise, and you're like, wait, all 4 of them?
You have a Sonic reference?
But actual Echidnas have 4 penises.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
I don't know if
Knuckles
Knuckles canonically has genitalia. That is never depicted, and that's probably for the best because there's already enough fan art that probably fills in the details. We don't need Second Corporation to do that.
Okay, let's move on.
Well, for those who
don't bring that.
For those
we don't
who
bring
may
up
not
that
know
rule.
about, so here's the prevailing theory among scholars about the origins of circumcision. This will be real quick. The idea was in warfare, you were supposed to go and conquer an enemy tribe and remove one of their ears. This is still practiced today. Bring me however many ears. Bring me an ear from every person that you kill, and that was your way of proving your worth as a warrior to your chief. Well, then it became noticed that, hey, people have 2 ears, so they would notice like the chiefs would examine these ears and be like, this is the same ear. There's just 2 of them. This is from the same guy. You cut off 2 ears. So then they're like, we need to think of something that was just that you can remove. That's just one of something. So like, I can't think of where it comes from now, but there's like debates about like using the nose, and they were like, no, removing a nose is too complicated. So they were just like, the foreskin of the penis. Remove the foreskin of the penis. There's only one of those. You can't fake that.
But what if you're fighting Amazons? You can't get any.
I heard.
That's
so actually, I mentioned this.
Yeah.
I mentioned this in the book that Hector Avalos, the late Hector Avalos, wrote a paper on. Although it's quite difficult to get hold of, but his theory was that it was a leftover slave marking thing. So it might be sort of connected to what you're saying, but that's how that got got
I have heard of
got
that,
to being
yeah.
in the Bible, and especially when you know there are these connections to slavery anyway. That it was just a slave marking that then got kind of codified into the Bible as a kind of remnant of some cultural like heritage there. But there you go,
Yeah.
penises, eh?
Yeah,
Were there any other topics? I mean, but incidentally, we've touched on about like 20% of like the content of.
We just wanted to give everyone
we've covered a
Yeah,
lot.
it's just a nice taster.
Yeah.
Oh, but we haven't done the best
We're
part.
coming up-
Now have to have a palate cleanser before you go on to the main course, which is buying.
What haven't we? Hold on, that. What, Aaron? What are you talking about?
Well, obviously the best part is when we do the differential equations and solve all sorts of problems.
Oh, is that the best part?
That is literally going to be what makes people go like, "Oh God, calculus," and then they leave.
Well, there's a reason it's mostly in the appendix, but
it's in the appendix, right? And there's a good reason. Good reason that's at the back of the book. I mean, God, who wants to read that?
But basically, we show our math for two things. One is how we actually get our projections for how many civilizations are currently in the universe, or at least the Milky Way, how we justify that. And also, when we talk about the problem of evil and how much worse the problem of evil gets by the mere existence of alien intelligences. Just by them existing, it actually makes the problem of evil worse. This was based on a paper by another philosopher named Zaniel Rumkopf. He had done a fair number of the math steps in his philosophy paper to show things, and basically Jonathan and I, we kind of filled in the last of the steps and even created a more generalized function, so you can say, here's how bad the problem of evil is right now, and here's how much you need to update it once we know aliens exist.
You know that Aaron is a super kind and generous human being when he says twice in the last conversation, in the last bit he said our maths, as if like I played any part in that at all. Not our maths that we did. I'm like, really?
No, math is as much philosophy as it is numbers. Like math, you in order to do practical math, you have to understand the proofs and the philosophy behind it. So it makes sense if someone is. If you obviously had your input and ideas, he just made them numerical.
This is it. It's what a team! What a team! But actually, I think one of the most important arguments in the book is probably the problem of evil argument. And I like just really quickly to sort of, I guess one of the main points here is because you could look at some of these problems and say, well, if this problem is solved once on Earth. Right, whatever the issue is, you've got some philosophical problem with humans and God, and you've got this issue, and just multiplying out a billion times with billions of instances of intelligent life. If it's solved once on Earth, then it's solved a billion times, right? So so we talk a lot about that, and also, but in terms of the problem of evil, if you had the Earth now, right, and the most evil on Earth was just like every couple of days you stubbed your toe, you'd be like. The problem of evil wouldn't really be. It wouldn't really be this massive. I mean, obviously everything's relative, but it wouldn't be like a really difficult thing to explain away, right? But when you start talking about a tsunami that's killed 240,000 people, when you talk about global pandemics, when you talk about murder, rape, and all of this plethora of stuff, then actually that is just intuitively the case that is more difficult to explain. In light of an all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful God, right? Than just stubbing your toe once every so often. So if you're cool with that, then the idea that using the Copernican principle again, then we can suggest that the amount of suffering on Earth is actually falls pretty much in the average, and that actually out there in the cosmos there is going to be evil and suffering to gargantuan levels. Like instead of a tsunami or a kind of like an extinction event on the planet, it might be a galaxy extinction event or something like that. And so therefore,
or there could be like this Death Star type structure just destroys an entire planet.
Not a Death
just
Star,
throwing that out there.
But a death of a star, a nebulous explosion.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh yeah,
really
supernovae. Yes, actual Death Stars. No, and why? I actually did the math on that. The recoil would actually destroy the Death Star. And if you want to talk about the math about that, I can.
No one said they want to talk about the math. No one said it.
Okay, so one of the things that we haven't really studied,
Okay,
but is something that should happen, is the shock wave in space. I want to know how that will work. And that is a whole other math problem. I'm just going to tell you that right now.
No one ever screams. No one can hear you scream in space.
A few different shock waves.
Right? You can't. Sorry, that is my own. Like,
Yeah.
I really want to know what a shock wave in space would look like, and if it's expelled or.
But yeah, so
the point is that if you're comparing, if you're comparing the stubbing your toe to tsunamis and everything, all of the evil in the earth now, and you say all of this extra evil stuff affects the probability of an all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful God existing, right? It's slightly less probable, or very less probable. Like it's at least some degree less probable that God exists, that kind of God exists, given this extra amount of evil that we suffer on Earth compared to just stubbing your toe. Then, if you're taking that to the next level and saying, well, actually, here's a level in the universe of all this suffering, and it's gargantuan levels of suffering, then that will affect the probability of God existing as well. Is a broad synopsis. I mean, there's a lot more to it, and we talk a lot more in depth. But
yeah.
Do you get the point that there is one of those things that says actually this really does affect the probability of an all-loving God existing?
These are not.
That's the thing I like to talk about a lot, is like the modern apologists like to have they rely on a false dichotomy. They say, especially when debating atheists, they're like, so you're saying either no God exists, or an all-powerful, almighty, omnibenevolent, omnitemporal, all these things, this omni-God exists. So like, it's one or the other. And like, no, there's a lot more options than just those two things. And that's another thing that like y'all address in y'all's book. There's another fucking galaxy out there with other options that we haven't even thought about yet, that are just as equally as plausible as your omni-God. Because you can't demonstrate your omni-God any more than we can demonstrate that there's an alien out there who does not believe in God that has created all of us. I don't know if any of that made sense, but
the reason why I pick on omni-God, like most of my books are about omni-God, merely because most theists on Earth believe in, or at least of the Abrahamic faith, believe in that version
the
of
omni-God didn't come around until the Enlightenment period. Prior to that, this was not even a thing. The omni-God has only been around for 300-400 years, you guys.
And that's what I love about that, Ricky, is that as you've abstracted. So I don't know if you can see over there, Francesca Stavrakopoulou's God and Anatomy. So
you mean this book?
Yeah, we
no, that better British cover's way better.
I got the less fun cover.
Blue? Is the British cover blue?
It is beautiful. She even says the British cover is a lot better.
The English
go get it. I want
to
see it.
Not as fun.
She's like, no, go get it. I want to see the cover.
We'll do.
I have to admit, I have the book too, but in audio format, so I am really missing out, especially on the photos inside.
I have the audio.
It's got gold inlay stuff.
Oh, I thought that was
the difference between the English.
But it is. Yeah. Oh, it's lovely. Yeah,
it's really nice. But what I love this. I love this, Ricky, which is because you brought this up, which is the idea that the God of the Bible, of Genesis and Exodus and etc., is very corporeal, really based in the ancient Near East, has all these very anthropomorphic God. And you see this evolution through time to the Enlightenment period, where God gets abstracted out of that to the point where God is this abstraction, omni-God abstraction of all loving, all powerful, all knowing, etc. But the problem for the modern Christian is that this is a God they've come to believe in because it's more philosophically tenable. But this is a God of the Bible. And therefore, if they are to have any faith in the Bible, this God needs to be somehow true. And there's this tension between the abstract God and the corporeal God of the Bible that is basically unsolvable. And so therefore they live in this theological tension between those two ideas. And I just think it causes them so many headaches, because like essentially the only way out of that is just ditching the Old Testament completely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all for ditching the Old Testament. We can just throw it out. It's fine.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you there now.
People even proposed doing that, like Marcion in the 2nd century. He was proposed doing that, like get rid of the Old Testament. He didn't want the Old Testament to be in his biblical canon
New
at all.
Testament, religion.
Well, you can even go back before that. The idea of either throwing out or rewriting your old myths to make them conform to your new values. But the old ones, they can't mean what they really said. So Plato's reading Homer, and it's like, man, this really makes Jupiter, Zeus look like a rapist. It can't really be what it means. We can't teach the kids that.
Zeus is a rapist.
He's a rapist. There really is nothing new under the sun.
If you say Zeus is a rapist, it's just you have a theological misunderstanding. It's just you need to have it interpreted for you correctly by the guardians of the city. If this is Plato's idea in the Republic.
You're right.
Or
Zeus
by
is
the
a
Holy
rapist.
Spirit.
He's a sexual assaultist, and he has an addict, obviously. Also has a little bit of an electricity kink, and likes being birds for some reason.
It also, like, if you think about Danae, then he's also likes to golden shower as well. So he's kind of an odd one.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, that's how Perseus was born.
Yeah, indeed.
Yep.
I forgot about that one. I wasn't thinking about that one.
Yeah.
Well, Justin Martyr was, because he brings that up as say how Jesus wasn't really actually different than those other gods. So it's like, hey, you think these sorcerers are totally normal? Are Jesus the same way?
I was teaching some Greek mythology to a class once of kids, and I was going to show them this video of we were doing Icarus and Daedalus, and then I was I'm going to show them this video, and just before the lesson I just checked it over again. It was like a TED video as well, TED education video, and it talked about Daedalus's like previous and stuff, and how he designed the Minotaur, and it was all to do with like bestiality and a woman inside and it was really like deeply inappropriate. And I was like, thank God I watched that, because
yeah, that's also actually not true. That is actually a rationalization the Greeks came up with themselves centuries later when they were trying to explain the myths of the labyrinth and the Minotaur. So the Minotaur was actually a guy just named Mr. Taurus. And I'm not making this up. These were rationalizations that existed in the Greco-Roman period.
Mr. Taurus. Was he a mythification or a personification of the constellation?
No, I think he was just called Mr. Bull, and that then got confused into this half bull, half man underneath this extremely elaborate maze.
Why would you call a bull Mister? Sorry, I'm just enjoying this.
I mean,
when you try to cut me down like that, you come a little too close, and now my voice has gone up a little bit. So
it's not you, though. It's just I have issues with
I was making a castration joke.
Snip, snip.
Going back to what you were saying earlier, Aaron, about the early apologists, that's one point I'd like to make is like apologists today are very insistent that Christianity is so different from every other religion. Like the resurrection account is so different from all these other ancient religions. When in 2nd and 3rd century apologetics, guys like Clement and Justin Martyr were like, no, this is no different. This is we believe the same things pretty much that you guys believe. It's not weird, you guys. We believe almost the exact same thing. So stop treating us like we're weird.
My big thing is
like,
that
this is so unique.
Well, my big thing is that within pantheons, people understood that their gods that they worshipped had fallible traits, that they had problems, that they had problems that they'd overcome, and that there were mistakes made, and that they learned from them, or they didn't learn from them, and then like repercussions would happen. Whereas when you look at the Christian God, no mistakes were ever made. Like, no. Everything he does has purpose. Everything he does
when you read the Bible. Yeah, clearly when you read the Bible, God seems like a bumbling idiot who doesn't know what he's doing. He's trying to figure things out as he goes.
Man, I'm gonna
He's
like, I fucked up. Let's kill everybody, start all over.
Yeah.
God seems like
it reminds me of the thing I've seen a few times on Facebook and Twitter recently. If you think back to your past and you don't cringe about what you did back then, you haven't grown up and you're cringe right now. Yeah, so if God is thinking like he's never made any mistakes, that is some cringe to say the least.
Accurate. Accurate
Jesus
statement.
Christ. Yeah.
Jesus Christ!
Okay. Well, perfect timing because my kids are home from soccer, so I'm going to go ahead and end the stream.
That is fine.
I'm sure
lovely
Mr. Pearce
guys.
is in bed.
I was just looking for Justin Martyr quote there where he's talking about exactly what you're saying and about how, you say that Christianity is so different. The apologists say it's so different, and then Justin Martyr was basically saying, no, it's not any different, and then loads of stuff to do with virgin birth and everything. But anyway, that's a conversation for another time. Thank you very much.
So before we turn off,
so
I want to whoever has the book, if you guys have a copy in front of you, go ahead and hold that up. Once again, thank you so much, Aaron and Jonathan, for coming and talking a little bit about your book, but mostly just having some fun with us, being all nerdy and philosophical and all that.
And mathematical.
Mathematical. We didn't even get into the real math of it. We got into the practicality of the math.
Mathematical.
That's because math doesn't exist. It's maths, as everyone knows.
Let's say this much. I think in the stream we didn't get sufficiently mathematical, but I do think we achieved math magical.
Oh my God, that was so damn
No, do not encourage him, please, because it's terrible, and he needs to learn that not to say things like this.
Aaron, you want to be one of my best friends? I feel like you're gonna just throw puns at each other all the time.
No, it's terrible. He shouldn't
Jonathan,
be allowed.
as we are on the Captain Dadpool channel, we have to have the dad jokes. I'm sorry, even though I'm not a father, I have collected enough for that.
I'm really not sure we have to.
Jonathan.
But yeah, so
jokes are the only way that we can get by when we study science. It's a miserable thing. We might be fascinated with it, but if you study it long enough, you lose all hope for humanity, no matter what field you're in.
But I understand for Jonathan, these sorts of jokes could be like hell. It can be punishment.
Oh, jeez. Don't. No, I'm not reacting.
Don't worry. Every now and then you can get flogged or have some whiplash. It's okay.
The only hope for humanity is finding more advanced, intelligent alien life forms out there that gives us hope that we too can reach.
What if the more intelligent life forms only speak in puns?
No, terrible.
Okay.
Jonathan,
thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining us on the stream. I really do appreciate this. Was fun. I was super distracted for a good portion of it because of my kids. But this was a very fun discussion. I really enjoyed it. Thank you guys in the chat for sticking with us this whole time. I do highly recommend this book. I didn't get to read all of it. I think I got like a third of the way into it. And then I got busy with life.
Part, but I have 2 other books I have to get as well.
But it was very good, and I genuinely appreciate y'all saying that to me.
You missed all the philosophy parts, Ricky. I mean,
yeah, Ricky did miss the philosophy parts, which I then steered back to science, and it just turned into a mess.
But there's also a link to Jonathan Pearce's OnlySky link. Boys, see, here we go. Boys, keep it down for 2 more minutes, please. Thank you. Okay. So there's also a link to Jonathan Pearce's OnlySky account and Dr. Aaron Adair's website in the description below. I definitely highly recommend y'all checking that out. Get the book. It's good. And thanks again, you guys, for joining us. This was awesome. And maybe we can do something else in the future.
Absolutely. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
So say we all.
All right. Let me cue up my outro
May the fourth be with
because
you,
I'm not good at
and
this.
also with you. We raise our voices up.
Stay tuned for the. I'm not wearing my hood. I took my towel off.
Okay.
Stay tuned for the Revenge of the Sith.
This is the way.
This is the way.
Okay, here we go.
Hold on to your butts.